All righty, so Chapter 7 is where we finally start getting to take all this stuff that we've been doing up until now and actually put it to the test and see if we can't start figuring out how can we take the economy and get ourselves rich. Because that's the goal, right? I mean, again, this is the microeconomy. All we want to do is figure out how can we make the most possible money, period. All right. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to look at different types of market structures. And based on the market structure, we're going to figure out if the market is like this, this is how we maximize our profit. And we're going to explain why that happens and what our goals are or what our long-term plans are based on the way our market is set up such that we can try and maximize what our profit's going to be. All right? So the first type of market we're going to talk about is called a perfect competition. A perfect competition, there's three traits. In fact, in all of the different market structures we're going to work with, we're going to talk about the three main traits that describe the market, right? So what we're learning here are the market traits of a perfect competition. Now, the concept behind a perfect competition is that there are so many people in the market that everybody is competing relatively as equals. All right? No one has somehow made themselves better than anybody else. No one has somehow gotten so big that they can control the market in any way, shape, or form. It's a quote-unquote perfect competition. Everybody's competing. When you hear business people, when you hear politicians talk about businesses, this is what they say all of our businesses in America are. Okay? It's absolute bullshit, okay, mind you. But this is what they say our markets should all be like, okay? That there's lots of different competitors, they're all competing against each other, and because they're competing against each other, you people, as buyers of their product, you get a nice low price. Ask any politician, they'll tell you that's what America's built on, right? That's the power of democracy, right? Is the freedom of you as people to start up a business and do whatever you want. There should be no regulation that would stop you from starting the business of your dreams and becoming rich and wealthy and a one-percenter, just like Bill Gates or, pick your favorite one-percenter who doesn't even know you exist. But you're going to be them soon. Right? I mean, that's the American dream, right? That's what we are all been sold since we were about 5 years old. All right? So this is the way everything is. Bear with me, all right? Again, and take it with a grain of salt. So the first trait that you describe is how many different competitors are there in the market, right? So there are, in a perfect competition, lots and lots and lots of sellers. Because they're all competing, so there have to be a lot of them so that not one of them can get too big and not any one of them can, run the show. And what I like to say is almost infinite number of sellers. All right, the second trait that you use to describe markets is what kind of a product are they selling, okay? Again, now this is one where you should start to see that there are hardly any markets in the United States that actually follow this. But the idea behind it here is that the product is homogeneous. And I'll put homogeneous in quotes because I know you want me to define it. What do you think homogeneous means? Anybody got a guess? All right. Basically, all of the products are the same. So whether you buy this good from seller 1 or seller 2 or seller 5,000, it doesn't matter who made it. They all made it, and it's basically the same thing. Right? So if Sears was making a hammer, if we thought hammers were in a perfect competition, right? If Sears made the hammer or Ace made the hammer or pick your favorite small, Marshall's hammer production factory. If you bought a hammer from any one of those people, it was basically the same frickin' thing. It was a hammer, okay? Now, when you go to buy a hammer, is there a difference between the hammer that was made at Ace Hardware versus the hammer that was made at, Walmart or Home Depot or wherever? Probably there is. And those companies are definitely telling you that they're different, right? But that's the whole point of advertising, is to point out to you that, for gosh sakes, Jeremy, buy it from Marshall because my hammers are better than everybody else's. Well, aren't they? Yeah, exactly, right? Probably not. All right, so what I like to say is that in these markets, there is no advertising. So any market where you have seen an advertisement for it, any product you've seen an advertisement for it, it is not in a perfect competition, period. Because that is the market telling you that my product is somehow different than everybody else's. Therefore, it's not homogeneous, it's not in a perfect competition, okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So first thing we talk about, right, so it's the number of sellers, type of product. And the third thing that we talk about is ease of enter and exit. How easy is it to get in and out of the market? In a perfect competition, it's very easy to enter or exit the market. In other words, it doesn't take a whole lot of capital to start the business. That's Julie's. Sure. Thanks. The idea being here that, if you want to get into this business, you could just, do it at the drop of a hat, right? Maybe cost you $50 to $100 or something like that. Boom, you're in on it, right? And that if you want to get out of it, it's equally as easy to switch, just to quit producing in that particular market. You can do it. All right, so my question to you then, given these three traits, and again, this is the number one killer, right? No advertising. Give me some examples. Think of a product that never is advertised, is made by thousands to hundreds of thousands of different companies or people, and who can get in and out of that market relatively easy. Bread. That's not too bad. I mean, you're on the right track at least. Bread's pretty close. But have you ever seen an advertisement for bread? Yeah, Wonder Bread's better, right? Paper? Well, that might be a good one, right? I mean, how many of you have actually seen, an advertisement for,
School supplies. Back to school, the advertisements have it in there.
what? Dunder Mifflin, there you go. So, well, shoot, there's got to be at least some examples of this kind of a market, right? I mean, this is America, right, where the perfect competition exists. We are free. Okay, realize that, of course, this is an extreme. There aren't any examples that truly fit directly into this particular model, but there are some that are relatively close, all right? So, first of all, you have to think of products that, one, aren't advertised, which is tough for us, since really the only kind of markets we know are the things that have been advertised to us, right? I mean, that's kind of the whole point. But in this particular case, one of the things that you have to have is lots and lots and lots of people growing it. Corn. Feed corn for cows. Have you ever seen an advertisement on TV or on the radio saying, my feed corn that I produced in my farm in Wisconsin is better than the feed corn that those bastards grew in Illinois across the border? I mean, why would they bother, right? I mean, one, they're not trying to sell you the corn. They're trying to sell it to the cattle owners, right? So it's really not anyone. But one of the best examples, or one of the closest examples, is feed corn. How many different people are growing feed corn in the United States, just in the United States? Probably a lot, thousands. Now throw in Canada. Add, 10 more. Okay, hundreds more. Throw in Brazil, throw in Africa, throw in Europe, throw in Asia, throw in Russia. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of people growing feed corn. They don't advertise very much. How easy is it to get in and out? This is where it gets a little bit fuzzy, right? Because, you kind of have to buy land in order to start a farm. And sometimes land is a little pricey. But, how expensive is land in Canada? Come on, they give it away for free. Come on, it's Canada. They're like, you're going to come to Canada? Woohoo, here's some land. It's not quite that bad, but hopefully the Prime Minister of Canada doesn't watch my videos. But the idea there is relatively solid. Think of it in this terms. Once you have the land and all of the equipment to farm, how easy is it from one season to grow feed corn to growing soybeans the next season? What do you have to do? Buy soybean seed instead of feed corn seed, right? It's probably not even going to make that much of a price difference, right? So it's really easy to get out of growing corn once you're growing corn and grow wheat or, soybeans or, whatever, hay, whatever the heck you want to grow. So that's why feed corn and other commodities are really your best examples that are relatively close to being a perfect competition. Now, I don't think any one of them actually completely fits into this mold, but they come as close as we can get, okay? So realize that I'm trying to set up one extreme case of a market and then trying to find something that's relatively close to acting like it. Now, these are the traits. There are some additional things that come out of the traits that we set up in the first three examples, all right? So, when we are dealing with these perfect competitions, remember that there are lots and 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 lots of sellers. So imagine, if you will, that you guys were a farmer growing feed corn. You harvest your crop. How do you sell it? How do you think farmers sell feed corn right now? They take it to a granary, and do they haggle with the granary about the price? It's fixed, right? They go in there and they say, well, if you're selling it today, the old guy on the radio told me this morning at 4:30, feed corn, $4.25 a bushel today. If you sell it on the futures market, it's $5.55 in January and $6.55 in February, right? It's extremely exciting listening to this older gentleman tell you about feed corn prices. And you listen, because if you're selling feed corn, you want to know, because you want to find it the day where it's going to be the best price, right? Now, if you think about selling corn, when is the price cheapest? In the summer, when everybody else is harvesting, right? Because there's a lot of it supplied. Why was it $4.50 in the summer but $6.50 in the winter? Because you can't grow corn, at least in this country, in the winter. It starts to shrink. So what do those farmers have to do with their seed if they want to sell it in January or February? They got to store it. It's going to cost them more money. And again, this is the sort of thing farmers have to decide, is based on how much is it going to cost to store it, is the higher price going to make up for the cost of storing it? And this is why farming, while people like to think it's not mathematical in any way, shape, or form, totally is. And you'd be surprised how many large co-op farms are now hiring mathematicians who do statistical analysis on the prices of corn over time. And that's why they make good money too, right? Because this is the sort of thing where it'll make a farmer a difference between, $100,000, $200,000 profit, folks. It's good money right now. But the fact remains is that when you go to sell your corn, you don't get to haggle the price. You are stuck taking whatever the price is on that day. So your example here in a perfect competition is that you are a price taker. You have to take the price, whatever it's set at. And it doesn't matter whether you sell 1 bushel or you sell 1,000 bushels. Every bushel is going to get sold for the same price, unless you're willing to store it. And of course, then it's just a matter of what day you decide to sell it. Now, why are they price takers? Because they're a small fish in a big pond, right? If you are if you're just one of a million different people who are fiddling with the price, you don't get to set it, right? So how does the price get set? Normally in a market, what do you guys think sets the price? Demand and supply, exactly, right? So there's a certain amount of supply and there's a certain amount of demand. On any one given day in the entire world, there's a certain amount of supply and a certain amount of demand. Based on that supply and demand, you get today's fixed price for your corn, period. That's what it's going to be. And you, as an individual farmer, you have to take that price. Good or bad? It just is, right? I mean, that's the way the market sets up. So, again, this number right here, this is millions of bushels. Look, on any one given day in the market for feed corn, there are literally millions of bushels of corn being bought and sold constantly, all right? But the fact remains is that based on this number and the amount of that people are willing to buy, right? Because have you guys ever seen the stock exchange work where they were selling, I've got, 250,000 bushels of corn. I've got 250,000 bushels of corn. And someone over here is saying, I'll sell it to you for $5. And the other guy's saying here, no, I'm only going to buy it for $4.25. And how many of you have ever played Pit? I got 2 wheat. No, I've got 4 flax. I've got 4 flax, right? Damn kids, they don't know anything anymore. Oh, I used to go to we played that with my cousins all the time. Of course, they also grew corn, so it was sort of a big deal for them. But anyways, the market, the overall market, sets your equilibrium price on any day. And the cool part about it is that it's really driven by supply and demand. And as the supply starts to restrict, so as winter comes around and then the amount of supply of feed corn starts to dwindle, what happens to the price? And then as spring rolls around and the summer schedule starts to come back up and more supply starts to come back in. Likewise, when the U.S. government decided that we had to put corn inside of our gas, we had to have ethanol. And 40% of our supply of feed corn had to go into ethanol. The demand for corn now, all of the gas producers, what did they do? They needed to start buying it up. What happened to the demand for corn? What happened to the price of corn? Went up with it, all right? So the reason why farmers in the feed corn industry are doing fairly well right now is that supply is relatively restricted. There's not as many growers of corn at the moment. And 2, the demand is way up because we are subsidizing it with ethanol purchases, right? We're taking all that corn and converting it into some form of gas that's somehow good for us. Or it just inflates the prices of corn, and so all our farmers do fairly well. So that when we have a discussion about potentially throwing away the farm, aid that's going on, we maybe will be able to do it. We'll see, and knock on a little wood for that. All right, so the price taker, they are price takers, and the key is that it's set by the overall market, not by any one individual or group of individuals. Cannot happen, all right? So if this represents the overall market, so we need to now look at the individual farmer. The individual farmer, he's an actual business. He's got standard cost curves for business. So if I were to draw my standard cost curves, I would say, most of the times they look something like this. Here's my average total cost. Here's my average variable cost. And here's my marginal cost. because that's the way, it's a rough estimate of basically any business is going to look like this. So whenever you're asked to draw the cost curves for a business, you will just replicate this. Now, I talked to you a little bit about last time about how, notice how this supply curve and this marginal cost curve look the same? That marginal cost curve is basically the supply curve for the business. All right? All right, now, what this farmer does is he says, okay, this purple is not very good. Here is the market price that the market set for that particular farmer. The idea behind this is that if the if the farmer wants to produce 1 bushel of corn, what price is he going to get for that bushel of corn? This price, right? If he sells 2 bushels of corn, he's going to get that price. If he produces, say, 1,000 bushels of corn, it's going to be that price. So what kind of a line am I going to draw between all those points? This is the demand for that particular farmer's corn. Notice that it's perfectly flat. Will the granary say at some point in time, no, you've sold me too much corn, I refuse to buy anymore? Nope, doesn't matter. You could have had 10,000 bushels of corn, and he would have said, sure, I'll buy them all, no problem. Because whatever they get, whatever the price is today, they're going to give you that price, period. That's their job, right? And the cool is that this price actually then demand is the same as price. And what do we say about perfectly flat demand curves? What do we call them? Perfectly elastic. And now you see why, back in Chapter 5, when we were talking about elasticity, we talked a little bit about perfectly elastic, right? These are things where doesn't matter what the price is, you're always going to buy as much of it as you can. That's the way granaries work. They don't care. Whatever the price is set at, we buy it. All right? All right, so now the big question here is, we've got demand, we've got supply, we've got cost, and remember that demand basically sets our revenue. We've got revenue and we've got cost. We should be able to figure out where we can maximize our profit. So that's our next step. How are we going to maximize our profit? Well, the key is remembering what's the definition of marginal. All right? Marginal cost is how much cost is added by producing that particular one unit. All we have to do up here is to figure out the other side of that coin, right? If we had marginal cost, that's good. What we also need is then marginal revenue, or how much money do we make from selling every one of these units. So again, let's imagine that a bushel of corn was $4. If you sold 1 bushel, how much money would you make? If you sold 2 bushels, $8. What's the difference between 8 and 4? 4. Okay, if you sold 3 bushels, 12. What's the difference between 12 and 8? If you sold 4 bushels, what's the difference between 16 and 12? If I kept doing this over and over and over again, what am I always going to have? 4. The cool part about a perfect competition is that your demand is the same as your price, and so is your marginal revenue. All of those three are exactly the same. And this should help you to answer the first homework problem in the Chapter 7 homework. Hint, hint, hint. Non-subtle. Now, the question then is, okay, when or where is marginal revenue more than marginal cost? So let's go to this quantity right here. Suppose this was 100. What's my marginal cost at that quantity? Well, shoot it up until it hits the marginal cost curve. Here's where it is. That's my marginal cost. Where's marginal revenue? This is the profit I made from that 1 unit. So when do I stop producing? Where marginal revenue hits marginal cost. Every unit before that, your marginal revenue is higher than your marginal cost. In other words, what it costs you to make it is less than the price that you're selling it for. Therefore, you make profit on it, you produce it, period. All right? So here, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and the cool part about this number 6 is that this is going to be the same for every market, because this is a mathematical identity. You are always going to make a unit if the price that you make it for, is less than the price you're going to sell it for. As long as that's true, you make it. You keep producing more and more and more. Once you get to this point, that's when you stop. Okay? So this is the quantity for maximum profit. So what farmers do at the beginning of the season is they try to make a rough estimate of what's going to be the price approximately when I sell my corn. Now, obviously farmers don't know what the price is going to be when they're going to sell, but they make their best guess. They tend to look at the almanac and figure out what supply is going to be and adjust accordingly. And they say, oh, okay, given that this is what I think the price is and here's what my costs are, that will be the maximum amount that I should produce. And this drives, for the farmer, what type of seed they buy, right? Because you can go out to the different co-ops and say, well, I want seed that's going to produce 200 bushels per acre, or I want one that's going to produce 120 bushels per acre. And each of those seeds costs different amount of money, and you can see where this becomes a very complicated graph, okay? And I don't want to take you down that road because it's tough. If you were in the agribusiness school trying to get that degree, they would spend a ton of time going through basically this with you. I mean, that's what you would do. You'd figure out, well, what's the average cost as I buy different levels of seed based on how much I want to have producing? Because you can differentiate the yield per bushel as much as you like. Higher yield, higher cost. Lower yield, lower cost. Right? These are great studies. The analysis, the math behind this, wow, kick butt. Okay. Now, given this example, this is just a contrived example for right now, mind you, is this particular farm making a profit? If they produced right here at their maximized profit unit. What you have to compare is what's the price that they're going to get for every one of those units, and then how much did it actually totally cost them for those units. Here's the price. Where's the cost? Where's the average total cost at this quantity? Right here. This is the price. This is the average total cost. This is the profit per unit. If the price winds up being above your average total cost curve, you make a profit. If the price winds up being below the average total cost curve, you don't. Again, please realize that this is economic profit, not accounting. Right? So this is the farmer making money on top of what he expected to make already. Okay? So if this farmer, is regular Joe farmer and he expects to make, $50,000 a year in profit from his farm, He makes his $50,000. This is money on top of that $50,000, okay? And again, if the farmer is losing money, if the price wound up being somewhere down here, they're making an economic loss, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're making an accounting loss, right? So instead of making $50,000, maybe the farmer only made $25,000 that year, right? So, I mean, granted, he can't pay off all of his bills necessarily. Maybe he has to borrow a little money. Maybe he's got to sell a couple more of the cows on his farm, what have you. But he's not, going bankrupt sort of thing, all right? All right, now, so for whatever reason, we have a profit right now. What happens next year? If there was a profit in the feed corn market this year, imagine, if you will, I am a farmer, and next year I go to try and decide what kind of crops I plant. What crop am I going to pick? One that makes you a profit. So what am I going to do? I'm going to switch into, I was growing wheat last season. I'm going to switch into corn. What's the neighbor next to me going to do? Same thing, right? What's the neighbor next to him? Same thing. Now, again, they're maybe not going to produce all corn, but they'll just make it more corn than it was before. So what's happening to the supply of corn? What happens when supply increases? So supply increases for the next season. Here's our new supply line. What's the price that the old guy on the radio is quoting off next season when there's this all over the place? Instead of it being $4 a bushel, what does it drop down to? Maybe it's down to $3.50, maybe it's down to $3.25 per bushel, what have you. And what happens to the profit of all those people who are growing corn? So what happens the year after that when all of those farmers who lost money growing corn, what do? They get out of corn, right? And so what happens to the supply of corn? It goes back down. Well, what happens when the supply of corn goes back down? The price goes back up. So the price keeps fluctuating, but where is the price heading towards? Basically, what's happening is that what you expect in the long run for one of these perfect competitions is for that farmer to basically have exactly zero economic profit. So if he expects to make $50,000 in the long run, that's what he's going to make on average. Okay, there'll be years where he's making more, there are years where he's making less, but basically those keep evening out as supply and demand shift because it's real easy to get in and out, right? Every season, for a farmer to change from wheat to corn, no biggie, right? So this is one of the standard analyses that you have with perfect competitions is that, let's go over here for number 7, long run, there's no economic profit. And again, that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just the standard analysis, right? So if you talk to any farmers currently who are growing, corn and soybeans right now, prices are relatively high. They're making a lot of money, and it's probably been lasting for 2 or 3 years. Do those farmers think it's going to stay around? Yeah, no, I mean, they're going to, there was another little mini drought so that supply stayed low, and so prices were up and inflated again. So those people who had a crop, they made fairly decent money, and all those guys who didn't have a crop, as long as they had, crop insurance, they all got paid equally as amount so that they got all their profit. Farmers did okay, but eventually they're going to expect prices to start going back down towards a more zero economic profit number, right? So good farmers, or farmers that have been in the business long enough, they know that yes, when there are good times, you better save, so that when there are lean times, you can stay alive, all right? Because you know that that's going to happen. Because that's what a perfect competition is all about, right? And part of what farmers have been trying to do is to find ways to get out of this, right? Because if your long-term goal is to break even, Why the hell would you bother getting into that industry, right? I mean, this is why it's been a hard sell for all of the younger, farmers to get into farming, because they're looking at it going, wait, I took some economics. Why would I get into farming? And even right now, the old farmers are looking at them going, yeah, but look at how much money I've made over the last 3 years. But the young farmer looks at them and says, yeah, but I know prices are going to drop eventually because I know that the supply is going to go up eventually, and then you're going to go back to being, regular farmer who makes not bad money, but definitely not great money, right? Not so much that you can be one of the 1%ers. And that's our goal, right? We all want to be 1%ers. So farming, no, that's not a good business. Again, remember, I'm only doing this because this is the micro side of the world where all we care about is money, money, and then more money, right? And if you want more money, farming is not the way to go, unless somehow you can break these rules, which it's really hard to do. Russia tried to do it one year. The state of Russia, the country, tried to buy all of the corn that all of its farmers were producing in one year to try and reduce the supply of corn in the market entirely, and then flood it after the price went way up and they would make a big, huge profit. Didn't make a difference. I mean, they had millions of bushels of corn, but unfortunately, it wasn't even enough to affect it for 2 days. And of course, if you've got 1 million bushels of corn laying around, there's a whole lot of happy rats. So, anyways, so the perfect competition, it's got some quirks to it. The other key to it is realizing that note that you have to have 2 graphs when you're dealing with a perfect competition, okay? You have to have market which sets your price, and then you have to have that overall market carrying the price over to your individual farmer. It's a 2-stage process, and whenever there's a profit, you go back to the other stage, and that stage adjusts according to it, right? So if there's profit over here, the overall market says, oh, there's money to be made. Increase supply, price goes down. If there's a loss going on over here, the overall market says, ooh, there's no money in that. I'm getting out. Supply decreases, price goes up, loss disappears, right? So that's why, in the long run, it's not that they're losing money, it's just that they're not gaining any either. All right. So that's kind of a busy graph, so let's try another one and keep this one a little bit on the cleaner side. So this is the overall market. So the overall market, this is where people are in the stock exchange, determining how many millions or billions of corn are being bought and sold on any one given day. They will set up an equilibrium price for the day. That equilibrium price is the price that these farmers must take. And please be able to explain why these perfect competition people are price takers. It's not because they have to, it's because there's so much competition that no one company or producer can affect the market. Right? Since there's an almost infinite number of sellers, one farmer can't change the ocean, right? You can make a little bit of waves, but no one's going to notice. Quantity. Right next to this, you will have your individual farmer. And the individual farmer is where you have cost curves, okay? So here's your average total cost, here's your average variable cost, here's your marginal cost shooting up through the middle. So in this example, all right, I made this a slightly exaggerated example on purpose. Here's where the price is, the fixed price that this farmer has to take. This price is their demand curve, it's their price curve, it's also their marginal revenue curve, all right? So again, I should add even here, and marginal revenue, right? It's a nice little addition. Now, in this example, what is happening to this farmer? He's losing money. Because we're going to say, where should he produce or where should he sell at? It's where marginal revenue hits marginal cost. This is your marginal cost. This is your marginal revenue. This is where the farmer is going to maximize his profit. Because in theory, marginal revenue is above its marginal cost. Now, unfortunately, what kind of money is this farmer making? At that quantity, here's total cost. Here's his average variable cost. This is one of the classic examples that we've actually seen in the last 5 or 10 years here in the United States, where the cost of harvesting the corn for this farmer is so high that the price they're getting it paid is actually less than what it costs them to harvest it. So what does the farmer do when it costs more to harvest his yield? How can he store it? He hasn't harvested it. It sits there. He lets it rot in the field. Why? It's cheaper not to harvest it, right? Because all the money he would have to spend getting it out of the ground is more than the price he would sell it for. Why would you harvest it if it's just going to cost you more to store it and handle it and put it into a bin and carry it from here to the granary? Why waste? Exactly. So this is why certain farmers literally leave the crop in the field. Because the price that they would have gotten if they would have bothered to harvest was below what it would have basically cost them to wind up harvesting it. You just shouldn't have bothered. Of course, what was this farmer was probably thinking is that the price was going to be way up here. But for whatever reason, it turned out to be a great year in Mexico and in Canada and in Russia. The almanac said there were going to be droughts and floods in those areas. There wasn't. Oh, crap. The price was way low. I'm screwed. This is why farmers also have crop insurance, because what the crop insurance does is it says if the price of your crop doesn't at least cover your costs, the insurance company will pay you up to that level in whatever it is that you grew. This is one of the things that we as taxpayers subsidize for our farmers. Yeah, it's not a bad thing per se. It's part of what the Congress is debating right now, is whether to continue this particular program that subsidizes the farmers to purchase the insurance that pays for all of that stuff. So it's a debate going back and forth, again, because it's actually a small number. It's only like about $25 billion, which government-wise is nothing. That's like pocket change. But, I mean, it's one of those where if this is just the insurance side of it, there's a whole... You guys know also that farmers are paid not to grow their crops close to rivers or close to any government property because of the runoff of the fertilizers they use. Again, they get paid to not grow any crops on that land, as if they did grow crops at a profitable price as well, right? Not at the going price, but at least this profitable price. That's what they're guaranteed. That's what our tax dollars pay for. Yeah, well, that's been around for literally forever, but that's because we didn't want our farmers to go completely under. When the Dust Bowl came around, that was what we had to do to keep farmers from going broke and keep our farmers from all becoming one big, huge conglomerate. Anyways, again, I like to show this example because it points out that if It's not really a number 8, but you could maybe call it a separate number or something like that, a little star. If price is below average variable cost, this is what's called the shutdown price. What the firm should basically do is not produce anything, or just quit bothering anymore. If you know that the price is going to be too low, don't bother to produce anything more. And again, that makes sense, right? If it costs you $3 to make it and you can only sell it for $2.50, yeah, exactly, sleep in. Of course, then you make nothing, which is a little scary, but making nothing is better than losing 50 cents per unit. Okay. And again, if that price winds up anywhere in between the average total cost and the average variable cost, the farmer will still harvest, he will still sell, he will just wind up not making as much money as usual. Okay? All right. So, questions about the different analyses and the different steps that lead us through 1 through 7? We're good? All right, so. Give me a little bit of time to clear all this crap off. All right, so question. If the current price in a perfect competition is at a point where we make an economic loss but don't shut down, if the current price in perfect competition is at a point where we make an economic loss but don't shut down, what do we expect to happen in the market? So you're a farmer. You ran a season where you grew a certain number of bushels of corn, and at the end of the season you realized that you made an economic loss on the corn. You didn't not make money on the corn, but you just didn't make as much as you thought you were going to, or you should have made. What do you expect to happen next season in the market if that happens to you? Okay, so what you expect is we expect supply of corn, or supply in the perfect competition. I shouldn't assume it's corn. Supply in the perfect competition to fall next season. What always happens when supply drops? Price will go up. And when price goes up, what happens to that individual farmer? Or to us in this particular instance? our economic loss will be less or even make a profit, depending on how much the price actually grew due to the number of people who had cut their supply, who got out of the market. So one of the things that I want you to be able to do is to put yourself into a perfect market at any situation, and based on the current output or the current analysis that I give you, you should be able to take one step or 3 small steps into the future as to what you would expect to happen. All right? Again, assuming that everything else stays the same from one season to the next. Right? Obviously, it never does, right? But in theory, if the same rainfall fell, if the same amount of sun happened, the same amount of growing conditions that we had this year versus last year, if all of that stuff stayed the same, this is what you would expect to happen just from market fluctuation. Certain people would cut their corn production, and enough of them would cut it such that the next season would see a reduced supply and thus a higher price. And so the question then is, you as a market person, deciding whether or not to grow less corn or not next season, should you or should you not? This is where it gets tough, right? This is where the farmer pays the mathematician $100,000 to $200,000 a year saying, figure this out for me so that I know. And the mathematician calls up me, the economist, and says, well, crap, I don't know how much supply and demand is going to shift. What do you think? That's when you get out statistics, you do the analysis, you take your fat consulting fee, and then you become one of the 1%ers. You guys can all do this now. All right. So, what I like to point out is that what you expect to happen there's supply and demand. And let's just throw ourselves in the corn market because corn is nice and easy to write, and I won't misspell it. So if I do an analysis in the long run, what you expect to happen in the long run, here's our long run expected price. The idea is that if this is our average total cost curve, and this is our average variable cost curve, that what we expect is that for our price to be right at this point, right where the average total cost is a minimum, and we will be adjusting how our average total cost curve is being done as a farmer, right? We'll be deciding based on the number of acres of our land, what's the most optimal feed corn yield that we can purchase such that we minimize all of our costs. And in minimizing all of our costs, we can always guarantee that the price will at least get up to that level so that we can at least make what we expect to make, whether that's $30,000, $50,000, maybe $80,000 based on your expertise at farming. But this is a long-run analysis. And that, folks, is Chapter 7. So it's the first step, all right? Again, before we call it a day, I would like to sort of give you an overall look at how things work, right? We are on one end of the spectrum, where there are almost an infinite number of sellers. What do you think the opposite end of the spectrum is going to be? What's the opposite of an infinite number of them? A very, very, very small finite number. What's your very, very, very smallest finite integer? 1. What do we call a market where there is only one seller? Guess what the title of Chapter 8 is? So we will come back on Wednesday, and we will discuss the other extreme, the monopoly extreme. Basically, our analysis will be the same, though. We're going to talk about the 3 traits, and how does that lead to the different characteristics that a monopoly experiences, right? And then once we get done with the monopoly, then we get to go into the fuzzy middle, all right? And the fuzzy middle has monopolistic competitions and oligopolies. And that, of course, if you look ahead in the book, is Chapter 9, where we start talking about the 2 in-between cases. The 2 in-between cases are, well, when you're in the middle, but you're closer to a perfect competition, or you're in the middle, but you're closer to a monopoly. All right? And really, this is as far as we're going to go into subdividing the markets. This is as far as I can expect you guys to get without diving down into the math and talking about all of the actual data that exists for these things. And then, of course, the very last chapter, Chapter 10, talks about the labor market, where we'll talk about how much you guys get paid for doing the jobs you're doing and all that other kind of stuff. And that will mark the end of the first half of the class, and that should be sometime around midterm week. The midterm for this class, folks, is an entire week-long process. So we will have tests for 2 straight days. So Monday there will be test, Wednesday there will be test. It's a long test. It's written to be a 3-hour test, which is why I make it a 2-day test. First 2 years I taught this class, I only taught this class as a once-a-week 3-hour class, and it just worked better if I made the tests basically the same. But in order to do that, you guys need more time. So come midterm time, be ready for that. We will be, that's like 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away, 2? 2, right? Yeah, so there's only 3 more chapters before it's midterm time. So be ready. Quiz on Wednesday over basically chapter 7, but, essentially also chapter 6, because, of course, this is chapter 6. You have to be able to draw this for next week because we have to do it for chapter 7. So that's why 6 and 7 are kind of okay, because they go hand in hand. All right, so be ready on Wednesday. Did I tell you what the homework was for 7? You guys don't want any no homework nights. That would suck. So chapter 7 homework, numbers 4, 5, 6, and 12. Page 148, 49. Okay, cool. Do realize, of course, I assume you realized by now that all the odd ones, please at least look at number 5 before, try and do it without the answers. And if you can't figure it out, or if you do figure it out, then compare them to the answers in the back of the book. Make sure you don't miss the free points that I'm giving you. Yes, I do have stuff to return. Joe, go ahead, turn me off. Because you guys took a quiz.